June 12, 1941, Birmingham, England. The war machine of Britain roared day and night, factories hammering out aircraft parts, ammunition, and engines for the fight against Hitler. The streets outside were quiet, empty except for the occasional blackout patrol or a lone worker heading home. But inside the Midlands munitions plant, the hum of machinery was deafening. Arthur Milner, a young factory worker with grease-stained sleeves and a nervous glance, leaned over his assembly line. Something didn't feel right. "Arthur, hurry up with that fuse. We've got schedules to keep," barked his supervisor, a tall man named Thomas Reed. His voice echoed off the steel walls, harsh and metallic. Arthur nodded, swallowing his unease. He adjusted a tiny fuse, the copper wires glinting under the dim lights, and noticed a small anomaly, a fuse wire that should not exist in this sequence. Arthur muttered to himself, "That's wrong. That's not part of the design." Before he could investigate further, a deafening explosion tore through the plant. Windows shattered, flames erupted, and the roar of steel against steel filled the night. Workers screamed, some trapped under beams, others thrown across the floor. Arthur was flung backward, hitting his head against a conveyor belt. Dust and smoke blinded him. He coughed, tasting blood, but his thoughts raced faster than the chaos around him. "Someone did this," he whispered to himself. "Someone who knows the factory, who knows all of it." By morning, newspapers downplayed the incident. The official line called it an industrial accident. 38 workers were dead, dozens more were injured, but the whispers had begun. Arthur's words, spoken quietly in the hospital corridor to a nurse, were already spreading. It wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. MI5 did not hesitate. A special internal unit was formed, known only as Operation Nightglass, tasked with hunting an unknown saboteur who had penetrated Britain's critical war infrastructure. The agency's analysts combed through the wreckage, puzzled by the precision of the blast. The fuse wire had been tampered with in a way only a trained hand could accomplish. Inspector Harold Kearns, assigned to the case, paced the hospital room where Arthur lay. "You saw anyone suspicious? Any new faces in the plant?" he asked, jotting notes with meticulous care. Arthur shook his head. "No, everyone's been here for months, but whoever did this, they were careful, too careful, like a ghost walking through the shadows." The following months brought more incidents. Factories across the Midlands experienced accidents following the same pattern. Explosions at night, delayed ignition charges, sabotage of train depots supplying the RAF. Each time, investigators traced a lead, but the trail vanished. MI5 intercepted coded messages from German U-boats suggesting someone inside Britain was feeding information to the enemy. Each clue seemed. Workers whispered about the mysterious figure in dim corridors and break rooms. Some insisted he was a German agent trained to blend perfectly. Others believed he was British, angry at the government, striking quietly, unseen. The tabloids nicknamed him the Shadow Mechanic. Investigators assigned him the designation subject, X-47, unknown, unseen, uncaught. By early 1942, the saboteur's methods evolved. Fuse wires were replaced with delayed charges. Factories were no longer the only targets. Train depots, munitions storage facilities, even minor RAF airfields suffered attacks. Each strike was calculated for maximum disruption with minimal exposure. MI5 agents noted the precision and timing. "We're not dealing with amateurs," one said. "This man has studied the war machine more than we have." One night, Arthur, now back at work, noticed something new. A torn scrap of blue fabric caught in a ventilation grate. It was faint, almost invisible, but it bore the insignia of factory supervisors. He picked it up carefully. "He's here, in plain sight," he whispered to himself. The tension in Birmingham escalated. Workers became watchful, glancing at each other suspiciously. Factories ran double shifts under a veil of fear. Officers patrolled the streets, their presence a constant reminder of the invisible threat. MI5's Operation Nightglass expanded, recruiting local civilians to report unusual activity. The saboteur's shadowy figure haunted every assembly line, every corridor, every train depot. Arthur confided to Thomas Reed one evening, voice trembling, "I believe he isn't hiding anymore. He's watching us, waiting, maybe even enjoying the fear." Reed's face went pale. "If that's true, we're all sitting ducks. This isn't just war. It's a nightmare in the middle of our own homes." This was only the beginning. The unknown saboteur had entered the minds of everyone in Britain, planting paranoia as effectively as he planted explosives. The nation's war effort relied on precision, trust, and secrecy. But Subject X-47 shattered all three. MI5 knew time was running out, yet each attempt to capture him ended in frustration. The man who believed shadows were his allies had become Britain's most dangerous and elusive threat. By spring 1942, the Midlands had become a war zone of suspicion and fear, though bombs came silently from within, not from the sky. Factories operated under tense blackouts. Every worker felt watched, every machine inspected twice before use. Arthur Milner, recovering from the initial blast, returned to work with a nervous edge, determined to see the saboteur caught, or at least to survive another day. "Keep your eyes open, Arthur. Something feels off," warned his colleague, Mary Collins, as they entered the assembly hall one grey morning. Mary had worked alongside Arthur for 3 years, and though cheerful by nature, she now wore a constant frown. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked the fuses. Arthur nodded, whispering under his breath, "He's here. He's always here. Watching." Across town, MI5 agents were piecing together a picture of the elusive subject X-47. Surveillance reports, coded radio intercepts, and eyewitness accounts suggested a man who knew every ventilation duct, storage room, and factory layout. He seemed to anticipate their every move. Colonel James Whitmore, leading Operation Nightglass, slammed his fist on the table during a briefing. "Every time we think we've cornered him, he disappears. He isn't just a saboteur, he's a ghost, and ghosts don't leave fingerprints." Agent Margaret Hayes, the sharpest cryptographer in the unit, muttered, "Or perhaps he's one of us, a British worker feeding information to Germany. Every step we take, he's 3 steps ahead." The thought sent chills through the room. The saboteur could be anyone. A man who smiled beside you on the bus, a woman handing you tea in the break room, a supervisor checking off your work. The enemy was in plain sight. That very night, another explosion ripped through a small munitions depot on the outskirts of Birmingham. The blast was precise, targeting a shipment of high explosive charges scheduled for an RAF bomber factory. Civilians were shaken. Soldiers patrolled streets with rifles, questioning passers-by, yet nobody saw anyone suspicious. In the aftermath, Arthur and Mary volunteered to help MI5 examine the damage. Among the twisted metal and scorched wood, Arthur found a peculiar marking etched into a control panel, a small symbol he had seen once before on the factory floor. He whispered to Mary, "It's a calling card. He wants us to know he's here." Mary shivered. Why? Why taunt us? Arthur shook his head. Because he believes he controls the fear. MI5's team expanded its efforts. Agents infiltrated factories under false pretenses, workers were interrogated quietly, and local police were enlisted to watch for unusual behavior. Yet the saboteur remained invisible. One particularly audacious attack involved rigging an RAF supply train with a delayed fuse. By the time MI5 agents discovered the device, it had already derailed, destroying crates of essential parts, but leaving no clue behind. Colonel Whitmore addressed his officers. "Gentlemen and ladies, this is no ordinary criminal. This is a man, or perhaps a group, who believes themselves untouchable. He is meticulous, clever, and patient. Every failure we have only proves he's smarter than us." Arthur returned home that night, exhausted and haunted by the day's events. Mary met him at the door, her face pale. "They found another symbol, Arthur." "The same one," she whispered. Arthur frowned, staring at the shadows of his living room. "It's not just a symbol, it's a message. He's telling us he's everywhere. There's no corner of this city safe from him." The city lived under a silent terror. Factories ran, trains delivered, and the war effort continued. But the invisible hand of Subject X-47 had infiltrated every aspect of daily life. No one knew when or where he would strike next, and the sense of paranoia spread like wildfire. On a particularly tense night, MI5 agents received a tip from an anonymous source. A man had been seen entering the old Walsall munitions storage. Colonel Whitmore dispatched a team immediately. Arthur and Mary insisted on accompanying them, believing their familiarity with the factory layouts might give the agents an advantage. Inside the storage facility, the team moved silently. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Every creak of a floorboard made them jump. Then, at the far end of the hall, a shadow flickered across the wall. "Stop! Don't move!" whispered one agent. But the shadow vanished. No sound, no trace, only a scrap of blue fabric caught in a broken vent. Arthur's heart sank. He recognized it instantly. The same insignia from before. "He's here," Arthur said quietly, voice shaking. "He's been here the whole time. And he's laughing at us." The hunt intensified over the coming months. MI5 officers and local police were stretched to their limits. Factories were reinforced, security tightened, yet every new attack confirmed the saboteur's cunning. Letters intercepted from German intelligence hinted at inside help, but the handwriting was untraceable. The question haunted every operative. Was the saboteur loyal to Germany, or simply a man who believed his own power above all? Arthur and Mary found themselves under constant surveillance, even as they tried to return to normal life. Their conversations were cautious, their glances over shoulders frequent. One evening, Mary whispered as they walked home past the blacked-out streets, "If we survive this war, will we ever know peace again?" Arthur glanced into the shadows, his expression grim. Not if he believes he still has work to do. The invisible war inside Britain raged silently, leaving death and fear in its wake. Factories became fortresses, workers became detectives, and every small detail, a misplaced tool, a tiny symbol, could signal danger. MI5 faced a saboteur who was not just skilled in explosives, but in psychological warfare. Every day, the unknown man's presence was felt, if never fully seen. By mid-1942, it became clear. Subject X-47 was no longer just a threat to factories or trains. He had become a ghost inside the minds of Britain itself, a man who believed he could bend fear and chaos to his will. And as the summer months approached, the nation waited, terrified, vigilant, and utterly unsure of who or what might strike next. By late 1942, the Midlands had become a city on edge. Every street lamp, Every factory entrance, every railway line was scrutinized. Yet Subject X-47 continued to strike with chilling precision. The pattern of sabotage had evolved. Explosions were no longer confined to depots or factories. They began to affect civilian supply routes, cutting off essential goods and sending the city into quiet panic. Arthur Milner and Mary Collins had grown accustomed to fear. Their lives revolved around the invisible predator. Even simple walks home became tense exercises in vigilance. Mary whispered one evening, voice barely audible, "Arthur, do you think he watches us now? That he knows when we sleep?" Arthur glanced into the shadows, his jaw tight. He believes he controls more than just the war effort. He controls our minds too. MI5 intensified their efforts. New recruits were brought in, informants planted inside factories, and coded radio transmissions intercepted. Yet every lead seemed to vanish into thin air. Colonel James Whitmore, frustrated but determined, held daily briefings with his officers. "We are dealing with a man who believes he is untouchable," Whitmore told the room. "Every explosion, every misstep, every destroyed shipment, it is calculated, and he is always one step ahead. I want eyes everywhere. We cannot afford to underestimate him." Agent Margaret Hayes, cryptographer extraordinaire, frowned as she spread intercepted documents across the table. "The patterns are complex, almost musical," she said, tracing symbols with a gloved finger. "But the timing, it's personal. He wants attention. He wants us to feel powerless." Arthur and Mary were once again pulled into the investigation after another depot explosion. This time, the attack destroyed crucial medical supplies for local hospitals. Among the debris, Arthur noticed a faint set of footprints leading to a service corridor. "Mary, look. These prints," Arthur said, kneeling. "He's taunting us, showing us he was here, but not leaving enough for us to catch him." Arthur insisted on joining. "I know these sites better than anyone. I can spot him before he strikes," he said. Determination etched across his face. At the junction, the team moved carefully. Night air was thick with tension, the faint whistle of distant trains echoing across the yard. Suddenly, a spark flickered in a storage shed, a delayed fuse, ready to ignite. Margaret Hayes shouted, "Stop! It's a trap!" Arthur lunged forward, yanking the fuse wire. The device clicked harmlessly, diffused at the last second. Breathless, he looked at the team. "He's here! He's right here!" The psychological pressure intensified. Arthur began to see shadows in every corner, hear faint footsteps behind him even during daylight. Mary tried to comfort him. "Arthur, we can't let him control our lives like this. We have to focus," she said, gripping his arm. Arthur shook his head. "Do you think I can't feel him? I can feel him breathing over my shoulder. He believes he owns this city, Mary, and the more we fight, the more he feeds on it." Meanwhile, the city faced mounting frustration. Workers were growing restless, families fearful, and rumors of betrayal ran rampant. Some claimed the saboteur had allies inside factories. Others believed he was a supernatural force, a ghost moving through the city unseen. Whitmore knew the saboteur was human, but brilliant. The next attack came without warning. An airfield depot was rigged to explode during the night shift. Agents rushed to evacuate personnel, yet the device detonated, destroying essential aircraft engines. Arthur stared at the charred remains, silent. "He's teaching us a lesson," he whispered to Mary. "Every time we think we've protected something, he proves us wrong." Mary looked up, eyes wide. "How do we stop a man who believes he cannot be caught?" Arthur's voice was grim, but resolute. "We find him, or he will destroy everything we hold dear." MI5 agents intensified surveillance, placing cameras, hidden microphones, and undercover operatives throughout the Midlands. Yet every plan was countered by subtle sabotage. Wires cut, locks opened, alarms disabled. Yet every plan was countered by subtle sabotage. Wires cut, locks opened, alarms disabled. The saboteur had an uncanny understanding of human behavior, predicting every move with eerie precision. One evening, Arthur received a note slipped under his door. A simple piece of paper with a single line scrawled in neat handwriting. "You look for me in darkness, but I stand in the light." Mary held the note, trembling. "Arthur, he's mocking us." Arthur clenched his fists. "No, Mary, he's telling the truth. He's always been here. He has believed all along that nothing could stop him." By December 1942, the saboteur's confidence reached terrifying heights. He attacked military supply lines, factories, and warehouses in rapid succession. MI5 was relentless, but every capture attempt failed. Arthur, Mary, and the investigators realized one chilling truth. This man wasn't just a threat to property or lives. He was a master of fear, using his cunning and knowledge to infiltrate the very psyche of Britain itself. Arthur muttered to Mary one icy night, "He believes he can make us doubt ourselves, doubt our country, doubt our war effort. And he's winning." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "How do we stop someone who believes that?" Arthur turned to her, a hard edge in his voice. "We don't stop him. We outthink him. We make him believe that the shadows belong to us too." The Midlands waited in anxious silence. The saboteur remained unseen but omnipresent, a ghostly force haunting every corridor, every train, every factory floor. MI5, Arthur, and Mary knew the coming months would decide not only the fate of the war effort, but the mental survival of a city under siege by a man who believed he could never be caught. January 1943, Birmingham, England. The city had become a war zone of fear and suspicion. Factories were operating under the heaviest security yet. Trains were monitored around the clock, and every worker was scrutinized. Yet Subject X-47, the unknown saboteur, remained invisible, haunting the streets, factories, and rail yards. Every plan MI5 made seemed anticipated. Every lead they followed ended in frustration. Arthur Milner paced in his small flat with Mary Collins. "It's worse than ever," he said, voice tight. "Everywhere I look, shadows. I feel him watching me in every corridor, behind every door." Mary held his hand, her face pale but determined. "We've been running, Arthur, but maybe it's time we stop reacting and start taking control. He believes he can frighten us. Let's prove him wrong." MI5, meanwhile, had begun a full-scale operation to trap the saboteur. Colonel James Whitmore orchestrated a plan involving multiple factories and rail depots, synchronized to force X-47 into a corner. Hidden cameras, undercover agents, and controlled explosions were ready to pinpoint the saboteur's next move. Margaret Hayes, studying intercepted messages, muttered, "He's clever, but every pattern leaves a trace. Even ghosts stumble." At the same time, rumors spread among workers that the saboteur had become bolder than ever, leaving cryptic symbols in factory corridors. Arthur and Mary, now unofficial advisors to MI5, recognized one symbol immediately, a small blue insignia, the same mark that had haunted them since the first explosion. Arthur whispered, pointing to a wall in a dimly lit factory. "There, that's him. He wants us to find him, but on his terms. He believes he's untouchable, but he made a mistake." Mary's hands shook. "We've followed every clue, Arthur. Are you sure this time is different?" Arthur nodded grimly. "This time, we end it." The operation began that night. Factories and rail depots were evacuated. security forces positioned strategically. Surveillance cameras covered every angle. Agents crouched behind crates, hearts pounding, waiting for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the main hall of the munitions factory. Arthur froze. Mary whispered, "There, I see him." The figure moved with remarkable speed and precision. But one thing had changed. MI5 had predicted this exact route. Hidden agents emerged from corners, surrounding the saboteur. "Stop!" shouted Colonel Whitmore. "We have you cornered." The man froze, eyes darting, as if calculating every option. Then, in a low, controlled voice, he said, "You believe you've trapped me. I have been everywhere and nowhere. You cannot stop what you cannot see." Arthur stepped forward, voice firm. "It ends tonight. All your games, all the fear you've sown, it ends here." The saboteur smirked, almost amused. "Do you think belief alone can bind me? Fear is a weapon. Knowledge is a weapon. Shadows are my allies." The standoff lasted tense minutes. MI5 agents tightened their net. The saboteur lunged toward a hidden exit, but Arthur anticipated the move and blocked the path. A brief struggle ensued, the man's strength and cunning clear, but ultimately, the saboteur was restrained, handcuffed, and finally unmasked. He was a factory supervisor, long trusted by everyone around him. His eyes gleamed with intelligence and madness, the face of someone who truly believed himself untouchable. "You'll never understand," he whispered to Arthur, even as officers led him away. "I did it all for a reason, because you all believed yourselves safe." Arthur looked on, heart heavy. No more shadows, no more fear. You believed you could win, but we believed in stopping you. The Midlands slowly returned to normal. Factories resumed work without fear of sabotage. Trains ran on schedule. Workers began to breathe easier, though the memory of the saboteur lingered. Arthur and Mary, scarred but resilient, reflected on what they had endured. Mary asked one cold evening, looking at the dark streets outside, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Arthur shook his head, though uncertainty still lingered in his eyes. He may have believed he was untouchable, but some beliefs can be broken. MI5 officers documented the case as a victory, yet they all knew the haunting truth. The saboteur's cunning had tested not just factories, trains, and warehouses, but the very nerves and minds of an entire city. Fear, when expertly wielded, could be as destructive as any explosive. But in the end, courage, intelligence, and human determination proved stronger than any shadow. Britain endured, and the story of the saboteur served as a warning. Even in times of war, some battles are fought not on battlefields, but inside the hearts and minds of ordinary people. Arthur whispered to Mary one last time, watching the city lights glow peacefully. He believed he could control us, but we believed in surviving, and that made all the difference. The shadow had finally lifted.